In 1964, at the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union launched a mission that was supposed to change history. A mission that was supposed to reach Mars, to prove, once and for all, that they were ahead. That mission was called Zond 2, but today, almost no one talks about it. Not because it wasn't important, but because of what happened after it left Earth. Zond 2 didn't crash, it didn't explode, it simply disappeared. And what's even more unsettling is that for a long time, it was still out there, alive. Signals were coming in, data was being transmitted, Zond 2 was alive, and it was heading toward Mars. But space doesn't reveal its problems immediately. Sometimes it waits. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, something started to go wrong, subtly. One of the spacecraft's solar panels failed to deploy. In space, that's life or death. Without power, the spacecraft doesn't just weaken, it begins to die, and no one on Earth could fix it. The communication became weaker, less consistent, like a voice fading in the distance. And then, contact was lost, until one day, there was nothing. No signal. No response. Zond 2 had gone silent, like something slipping out of existence. But even after contact was lost, Zond 2 kept moving, alone, unseen, unheard. In 1965, it passed near Mars, right on schedule, exactly where it was supposed to be. A spacecraft reaching its destination perfectly, and no one there to witness it. No images, no confirmation, just a silent flyby. It's almost poetic, but also deeply unsettling, because it raises a question that no one could answer. What actually happened out there? Was it just the solar panel, or was there something else? Space is full of things we don't fully comprehend, tiny forces that can have massive consequences. It's just gone. A mission that reached Mars, but never told us what it saw. Did it try to send a final signal that never reached us, or did it simply stop, alone, in the dark? That's the part that stays with you, not the launch, but the silence, because silence in space isn't empty. It's full of unanswered questions, questions more powerful than any answer we could ever find. Just a mission that disappeared without a trace. And yet, what makes this story even more unsettling is not just that we lost it, but that we almost didn't. Because for a brief moment in time, Zond 2 was not a mystery. It was understood, it was measurable, it was alive. There were signals, there were numbers, there were patterns, proof that it existed and that it was functioning. And then slowly, those patterns began to break. Not in a way that triggered alarms immediately, not in a way that forced an emergency response, but in a way that was far more dangerous. They became inconsistent. A signal that once arrived with precision began to drift. A transmission that once carried clarity began to distort. Numbers that once aligned perfectly began to contradict each other. At first, it looked like noise, the kind of noise engineers are trained to ignore, the kind that appears in every system, random fluctuations, temporary anomalies, nothing to panic about. But space has a way of turning small anomalies into irreversible consequences, because in space, there is no margin for error, no second chances, no repair teams, no way to reach out and fix what's broken. Everything must work perfectly, and if it doesn't, the failure doesn't happen all at once. It spreads. Inside mission control, the change wasn't immediate. There was no sudden realization, no dramatic moment where someone stood up and said something was wrong. It was slower than that, more subtle. Engineers began checking the data more frequently, running the same calculations again, looking for confirmation, looking for consistency, looking for something that would tell them this is still under control. But the more they looked, the less certain things became. And uncertainty, in a place like that, is dangerous. All you can do is observe and wait and hope that the system stabilizes. But it didn't. The signals kept weakening, not dramatically, not enough to declare failure, but enough to raise doubt. And doubt spreads faster than failure itself, because once doubt enters the system, every reading becomes questionable, every signal becomes suspect, every assumption becomes fragile. And slowly, the mission shifted from control to observation, from confidence to uncertainty, from certainty to silence. The final days of communication weren't chaotic. They weren't loud, they were quiet, almost too quiet. And then came the moment that no one could define. No timestamp, no exact second, no clear event, just a realization. That was it. No final message, no explanation, no confirmation, just absence. And in that absence, a question began to form. What if we didn't lose it all at once? What if it kept going, longer than we think? Because here's the part that makes this story even more complex. Even after communications stopped, the physics didn't. The trajectory didn't change. Zond 2 was still moving, still traveling through space exactly as planned, just a machine operating in complete isolation. And somewhere, in that endless darkness, there was once a signal. Faint, distant, human, and then there wasn't. And maybe that's the part we don't talk about enough. Not the launch, not the ambition, not even the failure, but the moment after everything ends, when there is nothing left to analyze. But the moment after everything ends, when there is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to fix, nothing left to recover. Only the realization that something is now beyond reach, forever. Because in most failures, there is something to hold on to. Wreckage, data, a final transmission. Zond 2 gave us none of that. It didn't leave behind a clear footprint. It didn't leave behind a final clue. And that absence is heavier than any visible destruction. But when something disappears, your mind keeps searching. It keeps trying to complete the story. It keeps trying to fill the silence. And that silence never answers back. Think about the distance involved, millions of kilometers. A gap so vast that even light takes minutes to travel across it. Communication at that scale isn't instant, it's fragile. And when one side fails, the entire connection collapses. Not gradually, not visibly, but completely. A line that once existed, no longer did. And once that line is gone, you are left with only one thing: distance. Distance in space is not just physical, it's informational, it's emotional, it's final. Because once something is far enough away, it stops being part of your world. It becomes something else, something unreachable. That's what Zond 2 became. Not a mission in progress, not even a failed mission, but something detached, something that crossed a boundary, the boundary between what we can still influence and what we can no longer touch. It proved that there are moments, even in the most advanced systems, where that connection can be lost completely. And when it is, we are left behind, watching nothing, hearing nothing, knowing nothing. That's the hidden tension in every space mission, not the risk of explosion, but the risk of silence, the risk that one day, the signal simply stops, and when it does, there is no recovery. Jan. We design systems to eliminate uncertainty, but there are always edges, points where planning ends and uncertainty begins. Zond 2 reached that edge, and then it went beyond it. Jan. Zond 2 is a quiet disappearance, a moment where something left our reach and never returned. And maybe the most unsettling part is this: we don't even know when it truly ended. Jan. Silence. Endless, unbroken silence. And that silence is still out there. It hasn't changed, it hasn't faded, it hasn't been replaced. It exists exactly as it did in that moment. Unanswered, unresolved, untouched. Jan. Not everything we begin gets an ending. Some things just leave. And once they do, they are no longer ours. They belong to the unknown, to the space beyond observation, to the silence that does not respond. Jan. In the moment where everything stopped and nothing replaced it. In the gap between what was and what is no longer there. That gap is the story. That gap is what stays. Jan. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a story can do is stop, without warning, without explanation, and leave you there in that silence, still thinking, still searching for something that will never answer. A question that drifts through the same darkness it once traveled, unseen, unheard, unresolved. And that is what makes it unforgettable, not what we lost, but what we never found. John.